Hello, welcome back. Good to see y'all again, my favorite coder cats and coder kittens. As usual, this is Becca going by Netcat or Netcat's Meow most places online. And again, I'm here to talk with you about Linden scripting language. Those of you who followed this channel since, well, ever, will notice this is a rather unusual place for me to be hosting my tutorials. This is because, unfortunately, because of the ongoing crisis, those of you who have been following recent news know I do not have access to the sim right now. It is a thing I am hoping to fix sometime when I can finally get everything in line and everything back on track, but that may take a while from the way things are looking. But anyway, as they say, the show must go on, so we're here to continue work on this dicing HUD setup. We have the actual controller for the dice. We have the actual D6. Switch to 4. The HUD has picked up the 4 on die 0. So, and we can delete the die with a simple click. So that is everything the die needs to have. The die actually does get its, if you recall, its number from onRes, ID equals resed, and ID is factored in during part of check. Here we go. Roll. Check. I had a thing set up to output from there. There it is. It says on channel -22, the number generated from check and its ID. So, here, we set it to pull out the ID from the rest of the string. Now, the first thing we're going to add in here is the ability to force it to create new dice. We're also going to take it and make it into an actual HUD element. So attach to, top is an easy place to put it. And that is a convenient place for my recording. So, it now has a D6 copy in its inventory, so we're going to set up to be able to res the dice. Res is one of those commands that I don't use all the time, so I don't have its syntax memorized. But as I've tried to tell all of you time and time again, programming isn't necessarily about remembering every detail. It's about knowing the process of what you need to do and remembering where to look up all those little details that you have a hard time remembering. So string inventory D6 vector position get position plus, we'll say 0, 0, 2. Vector velocity 0. Actually, no, we'll give it a velocity. 0, 0, 1. This is just the initial speed the thing's moving at. And I have to remember what the placeholder is for a blank rotation. One moment. Okay, I found the thing I did not recall, which is 0 rotation is the actual constant for that. And we're going to start it with integer parameter 1. So that you will see it actually is different from rolling 1 raw, which would be 0. All that compiled all right. We're going to shut that down. There we go. We got a 1 on die number 1. But in a lot of cases, you may need more than one die. Fortunately, that's very easy. Die number 2, die number 3, die number 4. So you'll see this die will actually cease to exist when I click this, and then the new ones will be rolled. Alright, that gave us 4 dies, and it's giving us all of that information. Now, this by itself still isn't all that useful. The next thing we want to do is we want to compile all of these rolls into something you can look at without having to look around at all the dice. Especially important if there are dice from more than one person. How are we going to do that? We're going to actually set a display text. So to remember the specifics for that command, we'll pop back here. Need to check something real quick. Sorry about that, just a little thing I have going on somewhere else that I needed to deal with for a sec, but alright, so right here we would have string text rolls, vector is color, and float alpha. And it won't trigger until it receives a roll, so. And it appears I made a slight mistake. What mistake did I make? Set text rolls. Does not look like I did something wrong. That's what I did wrong. I set the text it displayed to entirely transparent. I am officially a derp. There we go. And they are temporary. They'll delete themselves in a moment. So, in order to make this actually useful, though, you need to tally up your dice. How you're going to do that is rather simple. We're going to actually create us a thing that will chart the totals from each one, and it will turn off listening to each one as it goes on. Basically, if it receives the same thing from a particular thing, after a couple times, it will just stop updating. This is a good way to be able to tell it to tell the program when it has confirmed all of the dice, at which point it would be able to send that message to a different program. So if you were doing a board game or a competitive thing, it would know to go ahead and process that total information. So we're going to do this with a function, tally, and we're going to need a couple of lists. List. That would be, actually we can do this with one list, come to think of it, because we can use the position, the number of the die to determine its position in the list. So we can actually change specific list elements. Rolls. Tally. And we're going to take integer die, integer roll, and then I remember there is a way to do it. I do not remember the specific command off the top of my head. So we go back to Google, LSL, list, replace, that sounds right, list, replace, list. Returns a list that is a copy of destination with start through end removed and source inserted at start. Right, this would allow you to basically cut a specific entry out of a list. This is exactly what we need. List, replace list. We are also going to have to give you more ability to vary things up, after we get this done, we're going to set it to be able to change the number of dice you're working with. So, first thing we're going to do, list, replace list, list destination. That is going to be the list we want to have come out, rolls, list source, rolls, integer start is going to be die, and die, a copy of destination with start through end removed and source insert. Whoops, I did that slightly wrong. So source, string, roll. There you go. That will automatically replace the individual entries in the list. When it's done, we will have it show the total numbers, to which we're going to have to create a loop to automatically check the entire list. We're doing this as a loop instead of setting the individual ones because of a thing I'm going to add in a minute that I'm going to show you. But right now, integer I for I equals 0. This starts off your integer at 0. I is less than or equal to get list length roll and I equals I plus 1. A lot of people, by the way, will do this I plus plus. It doesn't make that much of a difference. I equals I plus 1, and I think it's a lot easier for people to read that are not accustomed to dealing with code all the time. So what this will do to tally is it will go through each entry in the list, We're going to add another integer up here. Integer total equals 0. Total equals total plus integer, because lists store everything as a string. So we're going to have to turn it into an integer. List to string roles I. And then we will set the text here roles total equals plus, converting it back to a string, total. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to convert this into another for loop. You'll see why in just a moment. Props for anybody that already has figured out why. Now you're wondering what count is? That's something I'm about to establish up here. Count equals 4. Integer count equals 4. So we are then rolling the appropriate number of dice. In fact, we're going to cut the number of dice down by 1. Easier way even to do that, we will say equals 2. Actually, that would do the 4. We want less than. So the reason why we use less than is here for this specific part is that this will continue to iterate and add 1 to the number as long as it is less than the target number. If the target number is 4 and we start at 0, which is for convenience for the list that we're making, then 3 is the last time that integer can be below 4, therefore will be the last die created. So, for convenience though, I'm gonna I'll just do a fresh res object. Should have preserved the code I'd been using there, just for my convenience. This is not my smoothest produced video, but I've been really, really stressing, so my apologies. Alright, that last thing that assigned a given number to it, we just made that equal to I. So, for each iteration, it starts out with 0, the next iteration is 1, the next iteration is 2. That goes ahead and assigns the number to each of those dice. Zero rotation. The velocity vector again is the force of energy in which direction. How much of a shove is it given on res? In this case, it's given a slight shove up, and it will res itself slightly above the person. So, for every iteration of this, for everything in the count, which you can set how many dice you're going to roll, it will automatically res one die, and it will do rolls equals rolls plus 0. Now, if you're going to do more than one set, that will throw things off, because that is just going and adding to that list. Which means, as written, it would keep all the previous information because I'm only adding to it. In order to stop that, we put here, before that loop begins, rolls equals, and in that bracket, that made an empty list. So this says, okay, I figured out what I was doing wrong. Right here, it shows the mistake. The thing being added has to be in the form of a list. That was what I screwed up. And it even says it right here, list source. So I have this formatted incorrectly. All I need is to add those brackets. Here we go. Function call mismatches type or arguments. That's because I misspelled it, needed an S on the rolls to make it a list, because that's what I named the list. That's successful. The last thing I need to do is set a call to tally attached to the listen. So tally starts off with which die and then which roll. So we do integer, die, integer, roll. There we go. With that, that will call the function we created up here. Each time it feeds which die, what roll, it updates its list, it runs its list for as far as it needs to go, and adjusts the total with that. So let's give it a shot. It does not want to function now. What is the problem? It shows it's operational. It compiles. Okay, welcome back. Sorry about that. Proving that I'm really not all there today. The problem I was having not being able to res dice was that I had just put position 2. This was off in one corner of the sim, 2 meters off the ground, and that just was not achievable. So I remember to put back in the get position, and that solved that. Now, I seem to be running into one other unexpected problem. So, thus proving things don't always run as smoothly as I anticipate them doing. So, and this video is getting a bit long in the tooth as it is. So, we're not getting it to update now. So the question is, what am I doing wrong there? I will figure this out. You will get an update next week when I figure out how I screwed up.